So now we've actually got a plan that we can, the client is committing to, and there's spots in the plan that you can put the client's name. They're going to do this by this date, and you can show the underwriter that they're committing to doing these things. That's a big deal, and that has really helped in the underwriting process significantly.
Welcome to the Insurance Refocused podcast, where we're highlighting real agent stories and how they are innovating to respond to the changes and challenges happening in the independent insurance industry. My name's Lindsay, and I can't wait to introduce you to my amazing co-host, who just so happens to be my mom, Carey Wallace. Mom, how you doing today?
I'm having a fantastic day, Lindsay. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. You're going to get a kick out of this. I was talking to a member earlier this week-ish, or late last week, I don't know. And it was right after we went to the Heritage golf tournament. And because we had just been there, and for those of you that don't actually know me, I know absolutely nothing about golf besides it being on my TV every single Sunday for my entire freaking life. And there's always some sort of like extra hole they have to play, or a hole off, or whatever they call it in golf. But we had just gone to the Heritage, and I was talking to one of our members about Scotty Scheffler. That's his name, right? Scotty Scheffler. Yeah. Yeah. And I was like, it was really cool to watch him tee off and watch him like interact with his caddy and things, because it was the weekend after the Masters. And the guy asked me, "Oh, Lindsay, are you into golf?" And I said, "No, I couldn't hit a ball if it like jumped out at me. Like literally, if I swung, I don't think I would actually connect with the ball." So I got a laugh out of that. Wanted to share that one with you.
You know what's even funnier about that story is I was talking to Clinton Orr, and he was like, "Hey, I saw you're not traveling and you were at the Heritage, and how was it? I've never been to a live golf tournament, and I would love to, and blah blah blah." And I was like, the coolest thing about it is you can get really close to the players. Like I saw Scotty up close and personal, and I never used his last name because I couldn't freaking remember his last name. How funny is that?
Yep. I am my mother's daughter.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm like, I know nothing about golf, but it was pretty fun. Yeah.
It was really fun. It was really fun. Well, we've got a great episode today. I am super excited to dive in and chat about all the great things we have on the agenda for today. So I would love to welcome Elliot Bassett to the show. Hello, Elliot. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. This will be fun.
Yeah. Have you ever been to a live golf tournament?
I have been to not a pro golf tournament, the like step below the pro tour goes through Omaha, and so we usually go there every year.
Cool.
It's kind of a fun time to be at.
Cool.
Yeah, they're fun.
Well, Linz, before we jump in, though, I do want to say something, Elliot. I have got to tell you, the end of last week was tough on your state and many people in your state. So I sure hope that you and your family, your customers, everyone you know and love is all safe, because that was really, really devastating. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, it was, and I appreciate that. And thank God there was no casualties here in Nebraska, at least. I think Iowa did have somebody pass away from the tornadoes, but yeah, it was quite the day. A lot of devastation. It looks like a war zone when you go through some of these neighborhoods that got hit. So, our thoughts and prayers are with everybody, and we're actually organizing a office day to get out and help with the cleanup and everything. So, yeah, it's been cool to see the people rally behind, all those affected. And, it wasn't probably 30 minutes after the storm, and there was just lines of trucks and people out, ready to help.
It is heartwarming to see that, isn't it? It's super heartwarming. But man, those images were, I don't think I've ever seen anything. And it seemed like it came up out of nowhere. I'm sure it didn't for you, but on a national news level, it was pretty shocking. So anyway, I'm really glad to hear that, you guys are okay. And I'm sure that there will be a lot to do from an agency standpoint in order to keep everybody whole. And, that's not an easy process. So we'll definitely be thinking about you for sure.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. This is the reason why we exist, right? So it's the time that we need to step up and it'll be busy, but that's what people need.
Well, before we jump into a lot of the topics we have today, I'd love to just learn a little bit about how you came into the industry and what your role is in your agency.
Yeah, so I came into the industry in 2010, right out of school. My father was the principal owner of our firm at the time. Not a totally family-owned agency or anything, but my cousin Andy is involved. He's a partner of mine, and my younger brother Chase as well. So it's kind of become a quasi family-owned firm. I'm the president of Ellerbrock-Norris today. So I am probably as close to getting into the industry planned as anybody that you ever hear, because nobody actually plans to get into the industry. But I was not planning on it, but I graduated in 2010, and I thought maybe eventually I'd want to, and it was just a good time with where the economy was and everything that, you know, I was able to do it. So the rest is history, as they would say.
Just out of curiosity, what'd you study? Please tell me it was insurance. Please, Lord, tell me it was insurance.
We didn't have an insurance. There was one course on insurance in my finance degree.
Oh, you have a finance degree.
Now they actually have an emphasis on it. Insurance, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. A fellow finance degree. That makes me happy and makes me like you even more now. See, I love it. That's awesome. So
us number geeks,
But that's only one of the things that you do. So you're the president and partner of Ellerbrock-Norris. You are the co-founder of Rocketship Ventures, LLC, and you're also the co-host of Getting Past the Premium. So I get asked all the time when someone looks in all the things my hands are in, how do you do all of that? I think you're doing way more than what I'm doing, because I'm not I'm not running an agency and a whole nother organization. But tell me, how do you split your time? Like, what does that look like in the life of Elliot?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is having good people around you. So my focus has been a lot on bringing in the right people, and then letting them run and own their areas that they're responsible for. We've really had to do that over the last probably 7-8 years. We've over doubled the size of the company, the Ellerbrock-Norris side. And then with starting a Rocketship Ventures, which is we have a software platform called Launch that we are actively licensing and taking to other independent agents. We built it for ourselves, but are actively marketing it out to other firms that want to utilize a similar model that we've developed. And so my time is probably spent. It changes week by week depending on what is needed, but the key is, getting really good people around you and letting them then go and run their area. A coach that I'm involved in has said, 80% done by somebody else is really effing awesome. And I agree with that. As long as, you can coach them appropriately, you can set up the right roles and responsibilities, and then let them go. I think that's hard for people to do sometimes. It's hard for me to do at times, but that's the only way you can, grow and scale a company, in my opinion. And so in this case, I've got my hands in a lot of different pots, but there's a lot of other people that are doing the really, really good stuff.
So this is not the point of this podcast at all, but since you're talking about hiring people and finding those people who can run on their own, what do you think is the secret sauce to finding the people who have the ability to do that? Because there's a lot of people who can't.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think the biggest thing is probably a cliche answer, but knowing and understanding who you are and where you want to go so that you can clearly articulate that to people is probably number one, because you want to attract people that have a like-minded or that are like-minded. And then, I just filmed a podcast episode with Brett Young, if you guys know Brett from Florida, Urban Young. And he called it, so I'm totally stealing his the way he was framing it, but it was, basically recruiting versus hiring, or, you want to be farming for talent, not fishing for talent, right? Because you want to be constantly getting your message out there in front of good, talented people, even if you're not hiring. And so we've put a focus on that certainly over the last couple of years. And I think just being able to have people that you've told your story to that are interested in what you're doing, and then being able to go to those people and say, hey, we're looking for somebody here. Think it might fit based on our conversations. Would you, like to interview or whatnot? But I think it's just being really clear on who you are and then not sacrificing on those, those values and sacrificing just to get a person in the seat. If there's one thing that it's like death and taxes, right? Or like the two certainties in your life. It's like the third one is if you hire the wrong person, it's not going to work out well. So be very stringent in who you're hiring and stringent to who you are. And, you'll get good people.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. And it's not an easy thing. Sometimes people, this is a relationship business and people get excited and they throw all reason out the window because they get excited and think that they can fit someone into a box rather than listen to the data that's in front of them to say that's not what they're wired. That's what you're wired to do, but that's really not what they're wired to do. And then they wonder why it doesn't work. So the only thing I'd add to what Brett had to say is trust the information in front of you and don't try and make it what you want it. Actually believe what that actually says. You know what I mean? Because we all are. I mean, if anybody who's hired has made that mistake, I guarantee it. And it's a tough one to recover from, because then now you got a bigger challenge on your hands trying to make a transition or have a negative impact on your culture. Like all kinds of things happen. And it was your fault in the first place for putting the wrong person in the right seat. So, talking about the agency and hiring and building the right infrastructure, obviously your agency is what led you to having a need that made you create Rocketship Ventures and create the solution launch. So tell us what that need was and what that path was like.
Yeah. So we started with our internal process, right? And basically our philosophy as to how we want to work with clients. When you look at why a client purchases insurance, right? It's typically to protect their business or personal life from a financial harm, right? Something that happens financially in their life. And so when we looked at it, there's many other areas of their business or their life that could cause financial harm, right? And so we really wanted to broaden not only our scope of services, but broaden our philosophy and how we work with clients. We didn't want to, start a benefits division, but then have it be like many firms are, where they're siloed and each kind of does their own thing and has their own clients, et cetera. We really wanted to build a philosophy that we could go to one business owner and say, hey, we're going to bring a team to surround you, and we're going to connect all these different areas for you to help you be more efficient in your spending your risk management dollars, be more efficient in your time, et cetera, and so on and so forth. So we started with that philosophy and building that out, kind of our value proposition, if you will, in the industry, and realized as we were implementing that there just wasn't a lot of technology that was purpose built for that process. We were piecing together different tech that didn't really speak to each other, and it ended up just being very cumbersome for our risk advisors, which are producers, to go and implement that, right? And we knew it worked when we would implement it, but we couldn't do it consistently and scale it because of the tech and just because of the internal ways we were doing it. So we finally just got frustrated enough that we decided to build our own tool, our own technology, to go and implement that process. Very early on and quickly, we had other firms that we are partnered with and other different things, and they said, "Hey, we'd like to utilize something like that as part of our process." And so we took some initial feedback from them and continued the development on it, and then rolled it out to actually take it to market to other firms. So certainly was built to help us. The really big thing that launch does is help us go through the right assessments, ask the right questions, given whatever scenario we're working in. So insurance, benefits, safety, you name the area. The system will actually score that risk for the client. So if you ask all of the questions, you're going to get a score that you can show to the client of here's where you're at today. Here's where I want to get you by doing these things. And then it helps you easily build a client strategic plan to get there. And so that was, that's what we were doing for clients. And we feel like is what we as insurance agents and advisors need to be doing for clients. And so we wanted to bring that tool to the industry, and that's where Launch was born out of.
So what kind of impact has it made on the agency as you as you built that? Because sometimes what we have envisioned and what we think is going to be the case isn't always the deal. And I will also tell you before you answer that is, you know, our industry is super unique where there's always this opportunity to innovate. And some people come from outside the industry to innovate, but when it's born inside the industry, it's pretty unique, and it typically um, has a higher success rate than those that see it from the outside and think they know how to solve, because it's a complicated thing. So I would love to know, what did you think the impact was going to be, and what was it actually?
Yeah. I mean, it was so organic in building it that I don't know that we set out and I don't have measurable statistics, right? 'Cause we weren't
Come
measuring
on.
statistics at that point. It was just, I mean, I can tell you, in the growth of our firm since we, number one, since we started implementing this process, and then number two, adding in the technology, which I think is important for everybody to think about too. I love your perspective on this, Carrie, but I always think about when you're implementing new technology or evaluating new technology, start with the process or the problem, not with the technology. And here we kind of did that organically because we had the process and philosophy built and realized we needed some technology to help make it more efficient. Um, but you never want to start with the technology first and then try to build out your process around that. It usually doesn't work as well. But like I said, we've over doubled the size of the firm in the last 8 or 9 years since we had this philosophy, and in the last 3 or 4 since building launch. It's probably been the majority of that growth. Again, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but the biggest impact, and I would like to go back and get statistics, is what we would call in the industry cross selling, but not necessarily just other products either, insurance products. We track what we call impact areas, but like insurance. So do we do the P&C insurance, including personal lines for this client? Do we do the benefits? Do we do the perpetuation planning? So, things that are services that are unique to us, but that go beyond just insurance. So that's the biggest thing we track. And that's been a significantly increasing trend that we've seen is we're doing more business for current clients than we ever have been, which is a big piece of launch.
What is the biggest competitor to launch? Is there one in the marketplace right now?
I haven't seen anything that attacks the specific problem that we're attacking. We get lumped in with CRMs all the time, so Salesforce, HubSpot, Agency Zoom, which there is certainly some CRM esque functions to launch. Like you gotta have account management, you gotta have task management and whatever, but we didn't build it with replacing those in mind. We built it as, if you're using Agency Zoom, let's say on the front end to market to prospects, to manage your calls to prospects, et cetera, once you get that opportunity, then you enter it in launch and you work through the rest of the sales process through launch. And then maybe after you write that client, you go back to Agency Zoom or whatnot. And we're working on some of those integrations as well over time. But that's kind of how I view it. So I haven't seen anything kind of purpose built for that middle portion. Like, how do I actually go and say the right things, ask the right questions to the client, between CRM and AMS.
Will you take us through an example of like soup to nuts how you would use it in the client um, cycle?
Yeah. So let's say I'm calling on a electrical contractor, right? So I've been calling on them for a while. So I've been marketing to them. I've got all that in my CRM. And then they finally say, I'm calling on you, Lindsay. And you're like, hey, yep, you know what? You've been calling on me for a while. I'd love to learn what you guys do. So we call that an introductory meeting. So we would go, we'd meet either virtually or in person. And launch will give you a few of your kind of opening questions that you want to have in that very open-ended conversational based questions that can drive that conversation differently than, going in and saying, can I see your policies and look for some coverage gaps? So you want to set yourself up differently from the start. So really diving in deep with that business owner. So you'd have that conversation. And at the end of that, you're going to lay out, okay, here's what it would look like through this process to work with us, client, through this before you would ever say yes, right? we're going to go through what we call an assessment. Different people call it different things, right? We call it a risk profile evaluation, but it's basically an assessment of their risk. And so we're going to go through that. We're going to take all that information back. We're actually going to score that risk. And then we're going to come back with you and present a plan as to how you can improve in the areas that we might see you need to improve in. And then you can make a decision as to whether or not you want to hire us. So we then meet with the client again. Either we like to do it in person. I think it's more effective or virtually like this. But you can also send the assessments to clients. But we're going to sit down and go through that. We're going to ask the various different questions. One of the things that we had to solve with launch was, there's a difference between a conversational assessment and an interrogation, right? And you want to definitely have more of a conversation with the client. And so we had to figure out, how do you answer open-ended conversational-based questions consistently, right? And so we came up with a pretty unique way in launch to do that with some template responses and things so that we can get an accurate score at the end of that assessment. So you literally get a risk profile score that tells the client, okay, you're a 453 out of 1,000 or whatever. And then the reporting will tell them even more specifically, here's the areas that drove your score down, here's what drove your score up, so on and so forth, so that you can use those in your presentation. And so then we take that information back, or in launch, and we go back and we build our client strategic plan. So in launch, you can set, what solution you want to recommend to the client. So maybe they need a return to work program or whatever. You select the solution, and then you select the actual steps in which you're going to use to implement that solution, right? So, traditional plan that most people would implement. Build that all through launch, and then you can go out and present that in a nice looking report with the graphics I mentioned and everything to the client. Say, okay, here's the results of our assessment. Here's where you scored low. Here's how we're going to help you improve in that. Here's where you scored high. Here's how we're going to support you in that. And we're going to try to get you from a 453 to a 676, which the system calculates all that for you as well, over the next 2 to 3 years, right? If we implement this plan. And then ask for the BOR, ask to quote the business, whatever at that point in time. That's kind of an example.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
good.
that's a great example. How have your carriers reacted to this? It sounds like something that they would like absolutely love.
Yeah, that's a great question. We get that question from clients too. Like, how does this impact my premium?
Mhm.
And it certainly does. Like, what we tell them is, I'm never going to get an insurance carrier to tell me that I get a 3% discount if I improve my risk score. But we do use it in our underwriting submissions, right? And
Oh,
so we will present this information to the underwriters in our submissions to say, hey, we've kind of pre-vetted this client for you. We've pre-underwritten their risk in when it comes to their insurance program. Here's the areas where we're going to help them improve. And here's the biggest thing is, here's the things in our client strategic plan that the client has committed to improving if they do business with us. And that's where we've really found that it resonates with underwriters. Because, like, how many times do they get, an Accord 125 that they're like, well, they're going to need to put in a safety program. And you're like, yeah, sure, they'll put in a safety program. And the client's like, yeah, I'll put in a safety program. And nothing ever happens, right?
right.
So now we've actually got a plan that we can, the client is committing to. And there's spots in the plan that you can put the client's name. They're going to do this by this date. And you can show the underwriter that they're committing to doing these things. That's a big deal, and that has really helped in the underwriting process significantly, especially when there's a little bit of hair on an account, or they don't have something that the underwriter wants. You can really put some concrete steps behind it so that they get more comfortable with it.
So, have you found that you guys or people who are also using Launch, what does it look like over multiple years of using it?
That's a good question. So yes, we want to see that score improving over the course of time, right? And so you can track that in launch, where it automatically saves any prior assessments you've done and presentations you've done, so you can look back a year and see what you did. And the way that we use it, I can speak to us, and then other firms use it slightly different. But say that we had 2 or 3 things, because you're usually not going to tackle everything in a given year that a client needs help on. You might try to tackle 1 or 2 big things. We'll go back in before the next renewal, And we'll ask them about those things and re-ask some of the questions surrounding those areas and see if they feel better about those areas based on what we've done throughout the year. And if we do, you're going to see that. If they do, we're going to see that score improve. And that's where we can really show them the progress that we've made. And so it's the beautiful thing with that, in my opinion, is we've had clients that the score doesn't improve, but it's because they didn't do the right things throughout the year. We were trying to get a hold of them to do this and do that. And when we show them that, you'd be amazed at how many clients are like, "Oh yeah, that's right. That was on us. We had a busy year, blah blah blah. That we didn't get to that, right?" But that's a different conversation than when it comes to renewal and none of that stuff got done and we weren't committing to any of it. And we're trying to tell them like, "Well, you didn't do this," well, then it looks defensive, right? Because we're just trying to win the renewal. And so it's just a transparent conversation with the client. Is here's what we set out to do, and here's what we did, and here's what we didn't do because of these things, right? So I don't know if that fully answered the question because I don't have data behind it at this point, but we are tracking a lot of the data on the back end so that, once we get a few years of solid data behind people using it, we should be able to track some of those trends.
So, Elliot, I got to say, I'm really enjoying being on the interviewing side of this conversation because, recently I was on your podcast and you were the one firing questions at me. And you are one of the very few people that asked me, so tell me, Carey, what does that cost? And you know what? I feel like because you asked me that question, I can ask the same. So it's
You
more
should.
of a, what's the target agency here? Like, are there requirements that an agency needs to be at before they can implement something like this? Or is it really cost effective and it's something that every agency should be thinking about putting inside their agency? I really don't know. I mean, I think it'd be foolish not to be able to show progression and really highlight your advisory role as an agent. That's really what this is. It's kind of taking that and put it on crack if we're being honest, right? So
Yep.
tell me what the target agency is and what the cost expectation would be.
Yeah. So target agency is more so about, your philosophy and who you're targeting and what you're trying to do. And so if you're even a small firm scratch agency that's trying to grow, you're targeting commercial or you're going from personal to commercial, it can be a great fit because it can really help you implement that really easily. Where we find kind of the sweet spot of firms that can really adopt, implement, and execute with it is, I mean, it's all over the board on what you call a mid-size agency, smaller mid-size, but everything from, I'd say 2 to 3 producers to 20, 25. Seems like, they have still a team where they can pivot quickly, implement things well, test, move. You get bigger than that, not that they can't, but, it's just bigger organizations. And then smaller, you're focusing on a lot of different things when it's just you or 1 or 2 people. But so we just charge $150 per user per month. That number goes down over the course of, as you grow and add more users and things. But our goal, we're in the insurance industry. I buy software all the time, right? Our goal was that it could be cost effective to help you go out and close more business that pays for the tool 10 times over. And so, closing one small commercial deal should pay for launch for the year. And that was our goal in getting it there. So that's how we charge. Pretty simple, and trying to be on the side of the agency owner and help them grow their firms.
Yeah. Well, I love the idea and I love that it was born inside the industry for sure. I will definitely be paying attention and seeing how it grows and what that looks like. I have one more question for you though. So you started a
Yeah.
podcast past the premium and tell me why. Number one, why did you start the podcast? It is a labor of love from one podcaster to another. It is absolutely a
Yeah.
labor of love. But you know, number one, what's the purpose? Why did you do it? What have you learned? And what would you tell someone who was going to dip their toe into the podcast world? Because it's a pretty crowded space at this moment, right?
Yeah, for sure. You know, kind of the reason we started getting past the premium goes to a broader why that we have for the industry. as you mentioned, I've got my hands in several different things, but that really comes back to one singular why, which is, our goal is that we want to protect and perpetuate the small, privately held, community-based businesses that protect and run our local economies, right? In all of our communities, it's the small business that drives everything. The insurance industry is in a very unique position to help those businesses stay in business over the course of time. But we feel like our industry needs to make a shift, and it needs to go from just providing that transactional product and being a salesperson and trying to sell a product to more of that trusted advisor for that small business owner. And so, everything that's our entire model at Ellerbrock-Norris. That's why we're taking launch to other firms. We could easily just keep launch to help grow Ellerbrock-Norris. But, we feel like, again, firms that implement this process will become more of a trusted advisor. And then getting past the premium is conversations like I had with you that help make agencies better and help ideally shift them to that way of thinking over the course of time. And so it is a labor of love. I have a lot of fun doing it, talk to a lot of interesting people. I learn a ton, which is probably, invaluable. And so, it's fun to do, and hopefully everybody gets some value out of it and, enjoys listening.
Yeah, it's actually one of my favorite parts of my week when I get to podcast. And, I would love to say that other people are learning, but I probably learn the most as we podcast. I know that sounds crazy, but it's amazing.
Totally.
I mean, I find myself doing what you did, which is, oh, you want to ask me that question? No problem. I asked someone that question a month ago and I love their answer. So I'm going to just repeat that because, they made me think differently about something than the way that I would have answered it. And it's an incredible way to give back, like your perspective, and then also invite others to share their perspective and allow people to consume it on their time. So while it's a labor of love, it's something that I absolutely, I wouldn't change it. Like and I think everybody has an ability to connect people through podcasting, through your content, through all kinds of stuff. And it really does help and have a reach that you couldn't possibly do otherwise. So yeah. Anyway,
Totally
Elliot,
agree.
Elliot, I so appreciate you coming on and sharing. I learn every time I talk to you. There's no two ways around that. And I will be cheering you on from the sidelines for sure and watching to see how launch grows and maybe even changes this industry, which is pretty exciting. So thanks for coming and talking with us.
Yeah, I appreciate both of you, and I'm an active listener of your show as well. So appreciate you having me on, and I enjoyed it, as I always do.
I assume everyone knows how to reach out to you. Maybe I shouldn't make that assumption, but I know how to reach you. But if someone wanted to learn more, how could they reach you? We'll put it in the show notes, but why don't you tell them how to get in touch with you?
Yep. Great way is LinkedIn. Follow or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there. But then also you can email me. My email is E as in Elliot Bassett, Bassett, @mylaunch.io. And you can get a hold of me that way too.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Insurance Refocused podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to hit subscribe and leave us a review so you'll never miss us. Want to learn more about how Agency Focus can help you grow your agency? Head to agency-focus.com or email Carey directly at carey@agency-focus.com. If you need to get in touch with me, feel free to shoot me an email at lindsay@agency-focus.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.